All right, should I get started?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, first off, huge thanks to you, Josh. I know you've been doing so much work behind the scenes, and with all the technical glitches, I know this is a big lift. So thank you for doing everything there and for having me. Yes, my name is Abigail Cabunoc. I lead Mozilla's developer-focused strategy around trustworthy AI. Before this, I founded Mozilla Open Leaders, which has worked with over 600 open projects globally. And before that, I worked at the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, where I was doing bioinformatics. So really excited to talk to you all today. And yes, I was supposed to be in the people and AI section, but we had a bit of a scheduling conflict. Then I saw this was about, natural language understanding. So that was really exciting because, let's see if I can change my slide. I can talk about GPT-3. I don't know if you've heard about this. I know it's not been very popular. It's a really niche area. I'm kidding. This is everything that's been on my Twitter stream the past week. This and C. elegans. But GPT-3, if you don't know, a new language model released by OpenAI, and select members of the public have access to this open to the API for the past couple of weeks, and we've been seeing these really cool demos come around. So on the left, you can see where you just describe a layout that you want, and then it outputs actual working code, which is mind blowing. And then on the right, they put in the first half of a blog post about board meetings, and then it output the rest of the post in really convincing text. So it's pretty amazing, and it's pretty exciting what this is able to do. But it does raise a number of risks. And I do appreciate that OpenAI has been good about regulating production apps with this. We have seen a couple apps have been taken offline. So it's nice that they're reviewing and regulating these just to make sure that they're being used correctly. But this article on The Verge came out actually over a year ago, and this was in response to GPT-2, which was also pretty mind-blowing, but GPT-3 seems to have really taken the world by storm. But in this, the co-founder of Fast AI, I love this quote from him, Jeremy Howard. It says, "We have the technology to totally fill Twitter, email, and the web up with reasonable sounding, context appropriate prose, which would drown out all other speech and be impossible to filter." And it's really scary just to think that everything that we see as spam nowadays, like it will be really hard. It could be really hard to detect that it's not a real person. And for things like when people are writing into Congress and stuff, you can have millions of generated text that could really sway what people think public opinion is, and really add to this whole disinformation, misinformation problem that we have on the internet. So all this to say that code is power. And I know sometimes it feels like you don't have a lot of power with what you're doing, but if you're writing code, you have so much power. You're really affecting what's happening in the world. And if Marvel has taught me anything, it's that with great power comes great responsibility. And this has been a recurring theme in all the Marvel movies. And yeah, I just really like that cute kid. It's really fun. But I did catch a bit of the participatory approaches to machine learning workshop last Friday. And Jamel Watson-Daniel from Data for Black Lives, she spoke on this power imbalances in machine learning. And I just love this slide so much that I just literally took it and stuck it here in my presentation. But as the technical community, as people who are building AI, you have control over what data is collected, what data is used for training, how much to reveal about training data sets, choosing models to be applied to data, interpreting models and model outputs, assessment and verification of models, deployment of algorithms based on models. And beyond this, I think even just how much you decide to weight a specific variable, even what language you want to use or what frameworks you use, all of these choices have a real effect down the line. And you have so much power. And this really spoke to me. And I think an argument we often hear with AI is like, oh, it's biased just because the data set is biased. But who chose that data set? Who decided what data was going to be collected? Someone was in control of that. And I think just ignoring that kind of power and blaming it on the data can be problematic. So I really like this move that we have towards looking at why this power is here. Yeah. All right, so this came out a couple weeks ago. Pratyusha Kalluri from Stanford and the co-creator of the Radical AI Network she wrote this Nature commentary piece that really spoke to me. It says, many researchers think that AI is neutral and often beneficial, marred only by biased data drawn from an unfair society. In reality, an indifferent field serves the powerful. And yeah, that really resonated with me, just because thinking of, we often just think of our technology as neutral, but by being neutral, it's amplifying the power dynamics that already exists in the world. So rather than just thinking of how neutral can I make my technology, I like this new framing of like, how can this technology really shift power to make society more neutral? And I just took a look at the chat. Everyone's freaking out about GPT-3. Don't worry, a lot of other people are going to talk about this later on in the session. So with this in mind, about thinking about how AI can shift power, I think we can ask this question, like, what can open source teach us about shifting power? So I want to talk to you a little bit about, about open source and how open source has shifted power in the past, and maybe how we can apply those lessons to today. So this was the story of Mozilla. It's one of my favorite open source stories. It starts with the early days of the web, with Mosaic and the Netscape Navigator. And this was at a time when people were discovering this new resource, and it was really exciting. The web was cool and fun. And pretty quickly, Microsoft wanted to get in on the action, and they used Windows to turn IE into a monopoly. And they reached almost 100% of web browser usage there in the early 2000s. And this gave Microsoft a lot of power over the web. And there's a quote here from Mitchell Baker, founder and CEO. The internet was going to be a stack of Microsoft products, from Windows to Internet Explorer to Office to servers to file formats to protocols. That's almost the entire stack. And it's really scary to think of what could have happened if Microsoft got to control all of that. And it was hindering innovation, and it was really limiting what others could build on this whole system. So Netscape did something that was pretty radical at the time for a public company. They publicly released the source code behind their browser for anyone to use, copy, remix, or change. And they knew that they couldn't compete with the manpower or the tactics of Internet Explorer. So they really wanted to harness this global community to build something Netscape couldn't do on its own. And this action, actually, of releasing the source code, inspired the term open source, which is really exciting and a nice piece of history of open source. So this action was actually a legal mechanism. So this is the first shifting power lesson we're going to have. So Mitchell Baker actually wrote MPL 1.0 in 1998, the Mozilla Public License, as that legal mechanism to let anyone use, remix, and distribute the software. And in terms of shifting power, this protected the user rights and really unlocked the potential for them to shape and use this code. So this was the first step in really allowing others to shape what could happen. So much chatter about GPT-2 and 3 still. Okay, so once the code was out in the wild, people started to band together and really call themselves Mozilla. These were designers, engineers, writers, community organizers that were excited to take on Microsoft, and let's take this open source code and build a better browser. And they were able to work together and really have that collective action. So here's the next lesson in shifting power. They were really able to, gather the action of the community. And one of the ways they did that was through working open. And I love this definition from the Mozilla Wiki about how working open is both public and participatory. So this requires structuring efforts so that outsiders can meaningfully participate and become insiders as appropriate. And by structuring things like that, allowing others to come in and help, it allowed for co-creation, collective action, and something that Netscape couldn't have done on its own. They made something much better. So a few years later, you get Firefox. And Mozilla actually took out an ad from the New York Times. And on the left-hand side, all those small words, those are the names of all the contributors that contributed to Firefox 1.0. And it really showed that at the heart, this was a grassroots community effort. And this was a huge hit. People loved it. It was fast. It really innovated on the internet. Internet Explorer had languished a little bit. And if we see here, Firefox didn't put Microsoft out of business, but they really broke up that monopoly of the web. So this gave us the web we have today and allowed us to have those building blocks of the web as something public and something for all of us to build on. And it really ushered in this age of Web 2.0 with like Ajax and REST and all of that. And past that, we've seen so many other people do this. And I think that's because we have organizations like the Free Software Foundation, the Open Source Initiative, and even Creative Commons, who are really vetting and like standardizing these open licenses to make it really easy for anyone to start an open project. So 25 years ago, if I wanted to start an open source project, I'd need a lawyer to help me write that license and figure it out. But now it's basically just a drop-down menu in a GitHub repo, and then suddenly I have an open source project. So in terms of shifting power, these reusable structures enabled everyone to have that power to start a new open project. So I hope you enjoyed that little story. And here are the 3 lessons I want to take from that: this legal mechanism, collective action, and the templates for reuse. And I want to apply it to some of the things we're working on today. So in terms of shifting power in AI, I'm going to talk about 2 things. One is our work around data stewardship, and then also about participatory ML. So data stewardship, I think it does do all 3 of these things, or we're working towards all 3 of these things. And you might wonder why we're talking about data when AI is, I guess maybe you're not. AI and data go together pretty easily. But 8 companies wield enormous power over the internet. It's really hard not to interact with any one of these companies. Most people interact with at least one. And it is a little bit opaque to know how they make their money. And a lot of them make money off of these free services. So really they're getting their power from our data. And this has really led to a lot of people have been calling surveillance capitalism and the ad economy, this idea that people are just using our data to gather our data and using that as their power. So one of the ways we're thinking about shifting power in AI is, what can we do around that data? Can we use a different data governance structure to really give some of that power back to the people? So here's an overview. There's a lot in here. I don't expect you to read it. This is a pretty nascent area of research with alternative data governance approaches. And there's a bunch of different ones that come up: data trust, data cooperatives, data commons, that all are slightly different from each other, but all are about shifting that power around data. And today I'm just going to talk about one of them. I do want to talk about data trusts. And you can see my very crude image I made here on the right, where a data trust is that legal mechanism that acts as an independent intermediary between the data subjects, those are the people creating the data, and the data collectors, the companies collecting that data. So the data trust is the one that holds that data, and they act loyally to the members. So they act in service to the members, and they negotiate with those companies according to the terms set by the trust. So the idea is, like, instead of giving your data directly to Google or Facebook, you would give it to a trust. And then the trust would negotiate with Google and Facebook to figure out like how much data that they give and what they do with that data. And this way, you get that sort of collective bargaining power. If you have enough people buying into this as the data subjects, the data trust has more power to act on your behalf. So on the left, I put the little check marks. It is a legal mechanism, like that license. It allows for that collective action. Right now, it is really difficult to set up a data trust. You definitely need a lawyer. But hopefully, I think this is something we're working towards. If you're working on this, please keep working towards this. Making templates for reuse or making structures for reuse so that it's much easier to set up a data trust elsewhere or use another data trust, because right now it takes a while. So the example I have is the UK Biobank. That's a charitable company with trustees that manages genetic data from 500,000 people. So these are patients that have donated their data for research. And then the trustees of the UK Biobank negotiate with the researchers to give up that data. And they do this on behalf of the people who donated their data so that they trust that it's safe. And then the last piece I want to talk about is about participatory ML, just because I think this is having a big moment today, and it's something I think all of you who are writing any AI can use to shift power inside your own work. And we already talked a little bit about the definition of working open, but I do think working open is a great way to shift power in your own work. So just as a reminder, Working Open is both public and participatory. This requires structuring efforts so that outsiders can meaningfully participate and become insiders as appropriate. And you have the power to invite those traditionally excluded from shaping tech to become insiders in your work. And by doing that, Working Open can really shift power. I will say if you're only collaborating with or inviting people who already have power, this doesn't actually work as shifting power. But what we are seeing is that not a lot of marginalized groups are actually helping create the AI that's affecting their lives. So are there ways you can invite people who may be affected by your work downstream or listen to them? Or are there ways that you can invite experts who've been studying the effects or the interactions between society and technology? So people from like social sciences or race and gender studies. And inviting these other groups to help, I think we'll be building better technology. And I know I'm low on time, so I won't go through all these, but if you're looking for like practical ways you can invite others in, one way is you can give people whatever you're making. You can also listen to them and you can collaborate with them. So just think about like, who can you be listening to as you're building your work? Or who can you invite to collaborate with that maybe isn't like you already? So I do work at Mozilla. Our mission is to ensure the internet is a global public resource, open and accessible to all. And 20 years ago, that was about the monopoly we saw with Microsoft and just needing to break up what was happening there in the web. And today, like looking at those big 8 companies, I think it is about building trustworthy AI and building new data governance structures and ways for people to really have power. So I do work on the Mozilla Festival. So it is scheduled for March 2021 in both Amsterdam and virtual. So if you're at all interested in this idea, we do a lot of work here. It's very hands-on. And we're also launching different ways for you to work with us on this mission. I know this is a big mission around building trustworthy AI. So if you want to collaborate with us, please reach out. Next week, I'll be announcing a few ways you can get involved with working groups and such, but I don't have anything just yet. So reach out. And then finally, we did publish this white paper around building trustworthy AI. It is just version 0.9 of the white paper. It's not our final version yet, but we did want to make sure we were writing this with the community. And I know a lot of people in this room are actively building trustworthy AI. So hearing from you and what you're doing and how you want to collaborate with us would be great. So please check out that white paper. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And just final thank yous. A lot of people helped with this, and I stole slides from and images from. And with that, thank you. I'm a little bit over time, but I will now emote. Clapping? No, I'm clapping for myself. Wait, I should emote differently. Joy. Joy makes more sense.
All right, thanks for the awesome talk, Abby. There's a whole bunch of questions for you in the YouTube, and I'm going to ask you a couple. Ooh. Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Let me just go to my YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first question. What's a developer able to do when open sourcing a tool that could be used for harmful purposes, like possibly GPT-3? Is it still ethical to release it, even if it's built with good intentions?
Yeah, and I think that's tricky, and I do appreciate how OpenAI has approached this by releasing different parts of it at a time and really regulating what's happening at the end. I think part of it is we don't have a lot of regulations on what we're building. AI is just a little bit of a wild west. So I'd say it's a little safer to release things slowly. But I'm glad you're considering some of the downstream effects and the potential harms that may happen. That's really important.
Cool.
Yeah.
So could you expand on the differences between participatory machine learning and user-centered design practices?
I feel like both of those terms have a deep history I'm not super familiar with, but I know participatory machine learning there was that workshop on Friday, and it's been a lot more about inviting more of the marginalized communities into your work, or making machine learning just more accessible to more people. That way it's like machine learning for the people built by the people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, a question from Emma Humphreys. So,
oh, hi, Emma.
She's asking, what is the advantage of using a data trust to negotiate with capital instead of working to end capital as it's a racist and colonial system?
Oh, that is a really good question, Emma. I think it's easier to negotiate with them first. Um, it's like an easier step to take than ending them. And I don't know. I have never thought of this question, Emma. Um, yeah, I think a lot of the steps we take with doing Trustworthy AI is working with what we have and taking the next best step. And it might not be, yeah, it might not be the best end goal. I don't know. If other people have thoughts on this, please chime in the chat. I think that's a super interesting question. And yeah, I think just part of our strategy is, given the structures we have, where can we be giving power away?
Okay, and another one. What are some good methods for contextualizing an AI project for those who are affected so they can give relevant insights? From June.
Yeah, and I think I'm so glad you're asking that question, because I see people, I've been seeing these like working groups asking for feedback from civil society, but then you look at what they're asking for feedback on and it's so technical. I think this is where it makes a lot of sense to bring in like good designers or good like science communicators who can take the research you're doing or take some of the high level concepts you have and make it understandable to the people that it will affect. I think that's an important step that doesn't always happen. So it might mean collaborating with, designers.